A very warm welcome to you, Saumya. Pleasure having you as always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me over on the platform. Thank you.
Pleasure's all ours. Moving on to our next panelist, Brillian SK, CPO and Mentor Operations and Quality at the Times Professional Learning, a division of Bennett Coleman and Company Limited. He's an academic program advisor with the S&DT PV Polytechnic for Women, Mumbai, and serves as the industry expert on education. He has been recognized for his leadership by Toastmasters International and was ranked amongst the world's top 10 leaders for the year 2015-16. Kudos to that. He was conferred the Rex Karamveer Award constituted by Rex and United Nations in 2016 for his volunteering services. Brillian is a speaker, mentor, and leadership coach and has worked with students, TEDx speakers, and CXOs. He was nominated as one of the top 100 influential coaching leaders in India as recently as 2023. Congratulations, Brillian. He is known for his ability to create future leaders through effective coaching and mentoring. A hearty welcome to you.
Thank you.
Sriram, an award-winning thought leader who is the author of Happiness Habits. He's a happiness at work expert. He consults and teaches happiness at the workplace. He's a high-performance happiness and life wisdom coach. He has worked in MNC and Indian IT firms in HR for over 25 years, and 16 of which have been as head of HR. He has featured in TEDx, NASCOM, Great Places to Work, NHRD, AmCham, Top 50 Leaders in South of India, Economic Times, People Matters, to name very few. My first question would be to you, Sriram. So, Sriram, given the perspective of micro-learning, which we are talking about today, it is a reality in today's world of the new normal. And how do you propose that we make this mainstream and we harness the merits of the same more effectively, not just limiting it to corporates, but the society at large?
Right. See, I think let's understand why it works and what's the issue with the current model. See, we've been used to a classroom module or a longer teaching-based training intervention. Now, the origins of that was largely based on the need for transfer of knowledge and convenience and the lack of technology. So it was more about the fact that we moved from, it was teaching in classrooms for colleges to teaching in corporates, and the same model kind of transferred here, and you had a classroom, you had a person taking sessions, and you had to bring together people. So the logistics, the lack of technology kind of forced us to embrace a similar kind of a model for training and transfer of information. Now, but when you go deeper into the purpose of why you are teaching,
Yes.
right, then it comes to the fact that there are two elements to this. There is a transfer of information and knowledge, but you are actually teaching for the purpose of somebody becoming better skilled or for transforming the person. Now, there is a lot of gap between information and transformation, which is where I think today we struggle, because we think that, okay, we've trained this person and given them information for 1 or 2 days, and automatically they will transform. And we know from our own personal experiences how difficult it is to change a habit of ours.
Absolutely.
Either giving up a bad habit or installing a new habit. So that process requires something where you are actually hand holding people through that journey. And I think that is where micro learning has become so critical in today's world, because it is able to accomplish that, along with the fact that people sometimes need that reinforcement. Even in terms of memory, right? Our memories are short lived, that you
Absolutely.
don't have the ability to hold on to that much information. So after a couple of weeks, what you retain is only about 20% of what you learned. And that is what is true for children also, where we say that one of the best ways for them to learn is to repeat the same thing.
True
Repeat the
that.
same thing over a period of time, then it goes and sits into your long-term memory, and they recollect it much better over a longer period of time. So
Mm-hmm.
if we want to leverage the use of these things, which is that first we want transformation. Transformation requires a journey of hand holding and repetition.
That's
And
right.
today, technology can enable that, right?
True that.
So that is,
Yes.
I think, the whole concept of micro learning, how powerful it is, why it is important today. And it is the same. It is just that people need to embrace it because the logistics can be a little bit more complicated. The
Mm-hmm.
whole, journey requires more investment, but
Mm-hmm.
it is an investment in a solid future because it guarantees at least 100% better results than your, short injection of knowledge, right? And I think
Absolutely.
that's really why we need to embrace and kind of look at micro learnings more seriously, a
Mm.
lot more seriously, I think, than what kind of COVID luckily pushed the impetus because we didn't have a choice. We
Yes.
kind of embraced it a little bit more voluntarily, but I
Yes.
think just the merits of this whole kind of model and the fact that today we can deliver it beautifully
Mm. Mm.
in really nice smaller chunks where people can absorb it, work with it, then of course there is a need for some physical intervention where you get people back and say, okay, what have you learned? And if we can kind of infuse a little bit of hybrid over there, where
Mm-hmm.
you get people to ask
That's an
questions
important
and
point. Yes.
participate in a conversation, I think then it's a brilliant way for us to move forward. I think that I'll stop.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I have taken up a few keywords from you, Sriram, and we'll dwell over it once we've heard from our fellow panelists as well. I'm just parking them for now. But picking up from what you just said, Sriram, I would move to Saumya. And Saumya, in your recent article with us in People First about skilling and reskilling, you spoke a lot about the brain drain that we've been going through, right?
Yeah.
Not just India, but a large piece of Southeast Asia has been going through this brain drain. So how do you think, and that has obviously resulted in a gap, and that gap is staring at us in spite of being a nation with the largest workforce that can be applied. You being from HR, you would know, as would all of us, that that is the biggest gap that we're looking at, having the biggest workforce and having the biggest skill gap, right? So how do you think micro learning comes in and bridges that gap? Or how can we utilize it to be able to bridge that gap?
Thank you, Neelakshi, for that most brilliant question, because that is something that we have been talking
We're
about a
struggling
lot.
with all the while, yes.
Yes, struggling, talking, debating, arguing about it. So when we specifically talk about micro learning and its contribution to the society at
Yes.
large, it comes at various stages. First,
Mm-hmm.
let us see, like Sriram has already pointed out, that learning was transfer of knowledge. And the second very important point that he said was that children or adults even included, and that is why we have ads flourishing, is the recall. The more you see something, the better is the retention and the more is the recall. And
Mm-hmm.
then there is that kind of a relationship that builds in your neurons. So when we are talking about all this, learning is happening at two levels.
Mm-hmm.
One, which is at a neurological learning, which is more of the thinking ability, and the other is the motor learning,
True.
wherein it then translates into the unconscious way of delivering something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we are talking, and that is why in India, or when we were seeing the knowledge transfers happening mainly through the clerics, whether
Mm-hmm.
it was through madrasas, through churches, through gurukuls, and people were doing this movement, if you ever see.
Mm-hmm.
That was putting people in a trance, combining the neurals and the motor and the repetition function. Correct. Now, when
Absolutely.
we specifically talk about the skill gap and the micro learning and how it is, so I come from an industry which is very labor intensive, right? We have
Exactly.
people who are setting stones, and at that point of time, how does micro learning help us?
Hmm.
A, I wouldn't say that it is the panacea of all the problems, not at all. Okay.
Definitely.
So
Hmm.
you need to have a background. Now, suppose if I come from a gems and jewelry industry, I need to have that basics where I need to know how to hold certain equipments.
Mm-hmm.
The micro learning can always be an add-on, very focused module or a capsular approach towards a certain, skill sets that needs enhancement, right? So that's
That's right.
one. That's one. Second is micro learning for people like HR, right? So you need to have a some sort of background, either in form of an experience or
Mhm.
through your degrees, diplomas, and then you jolly well go on Coursera and do a small course on psychology.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
understand? So then that becomes more, blended, and the knowledge absorption becomes easy.
Mm.
I
Mm.
have seen a lot of micro learning also happening during the COVID times where homemakers went on
Yes,
YouTube and started learning how to make soaps, homemade
absolutely.
soaps,
Mm.
cakes, and a lot of other things. Like I learned my crocheting techniques because I sell crochet, my mufflers for, the charity that I do. And that is something that I learned because all these complex designs I learned through the YouTube channel. But
That's
I
true.
needed to know how to make those loops and those knots.
Mm.
Without the basics, the micro learning cannot have or will not give you an added advantage. Now, if you are
Totally agree.
to upgrade your skills, that's where the micro learning can come. And of course, you don't need expats to come and fill in. The
Mm.
brain drain can stop. You can give that module, build in your learning platforms, in your HR modules, build those things in house, and then you can impart those trainings where people also feel that yes, we can enhance and progress, in our future endeavors. So that would be my take on
Fantastic.
it.
Yeah, those are some brilliant inputs, and I like the way you contextualize it to where you are versus the larger picture. That helps us consume the concept more easily. And coming from your NLP background, of course, you have that context as well. So, brilliant. I'll bring the crux of the discussion to you now, which is, and this is also inspired a little from your article in People First, where you spoke a lot about EdTech as an evolving platform. And the crux of the discussion today, of course, is that how do we power micro learning by digitization, right? Because that's what makes it, kind of go beyond the limits that we are operating within today. And that's what makes it a more societal venture than just a corporate venture. So I would want to now pick your brains on how do you think the entire digitization empowerment needs to begin in the microlearning space?
Thank you, Neelakshi. And I think the essence of the discussion takes me back down memory lane maybe a decade and a half ago. I
Hmm.
joined a global organization and they gave me a fantastic learning tool in the form of a small USB drive, a pen drive, loaded
Hmm.
with short PPTs, various modules that would help me navigate the ecosystem.
Hmm.
And the first thing went through my mind was what Sriram said. They are directing me to do something which probably I may not even want. And I thought it was a fantastic way of saving on trainers' cost, ensuring
Yes.
everybody knows what they need to know. But what
Mm.
they missed out is what I picked from Saumya saying, is it really adapting to what I want as a learner?
Mm.
Right? It was not.
Mm.
So micro learning existed in some form. Those days it was the so-called PPTs which were floating around, and everyone after a session would say, "Can I have your PPT?" that became a kind of a joke. But reality is, cut to today,
Mm.
learning on the go. Most of us who drive or travel in a city like Mumbai spend almost about 2 hours in peak traffic, right?
Absolutely.
That's a time when I want to avoid any sort of conversation because I know the conversation will not be pleasant. So I want to focus myself on something which I can control. Maybe
Mm.
at my pace, my choice, I decide I want to understand how Soumya learned the crocheting techniques,
Mm.
or
Mm.
maybe learn something which I have not done. So
Mm.
starting off from informal need based focus to directive. I mean, we need to look at a blend, and this is where uh, a conversation with a retail friend of mine made me realize that they are using micro learning with digitization very effectively. They have
Okay.
created short module 3-minute videos,
Mm-hmm.
which talks a lot about how do you make sure that the rack is maintained
Mm-hmm.
effectively? How do you look at inventory? And all of these are effective learning tools. And sharing one interesting insights, I was just looking at some statistics. There is a language app. I don't want to name the app because they are not
Sure.
paying me royalty. Uh, they have 763 million users.
Okay.
Okay, and
I think we know
it
which one you mean, but that's okay.
exactly. And there is this guy, a horse farmer
Mm-hmm.
by the name of John Arnold, who probably is in records of all sort because he has had the continuous learning streak of 2000 days, which is translated to about 5.5 years, which is huge, right? Think of it, a
That's huge.
farmer looking
Definitely.
at something. But that's where we need to look at. When we talk of digitization, what is most important, according to me, is personalization. Can the content be
Mm-hmm.
adapted to my need as a learner rather than
Mm-hmm.
giving me everything? For example, if you look at sales training, right? Every sales training goes through one, two, three, four. But maybe as a learner, I don't need communication training. I need to focus more on negotiation skills. They need
Mm-hmm.
to tailor it to suit my needs. So can they pick and choose based on my profile that has been created? That will be one of the game changers for the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Today, it's I joined a micro learning app recently, and I had a tough time trying to figure out karna kaise. But you get lost.
Mm-hmm.
So I think making it simple, the UI UX should be so intuitive that I don't need to look at a help book or look at Google or YouTube videos to find out how do I navigate this. It should
That's
be
right.
intuitive. It should be very simple.
Mm-hmm.
One essence, while it is self-paced, while it is given as a short-term learning, is also to focus on creating an engagement for the learner. We all know, right? MOOCs have failed because there is a lack of engagement. After a period of time, the interest drops. So,
That's right.
can digitization, through the form of maybe gamification, maybe
Hmm.
leaderboards, I don't know what all we can
Hmm.
think of,
Hmm. Hmm.
keep me engaged, give me that nudge to say, hey, brilliant, you left this at this, would you want to complete it? Just about 2 more minutes left in your course.
Hmm. Hmm.
Those are some things which we should look at. One interesting thing which I want to take from the concept of Netflix and Prime Video is, you may want to watch, right, based on your interest. If you have watched a particular
Recommendations.
series,
Yes.
it gives you a recommendation in terms of what it is. Can the digitization help learners curate a journey for saying,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you did this, maybe I believe you are looking for this as well. It gives me a sense of direction where I can move, and it's all about the overall experience today. It's not just about reading content. And honestly, as Saumya said, content is available on YouTube. Is it what I'm looking at? The answer is no. I'm looking at probably something
That's
which
true.
can make me relevant to what I want to do as a learner. And most important, is
Hmm.
it accessible without fancy gadgets and speed or internet
Hmm.
requirements? We know how patchy internet networks can be. Can we create something which doesn't really latch on, and it will take micro learning to the grassroots as well? And I think that's when we can say
Yeah.
digitization has really arrived and micro learning is
Has really impacted lives. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Sriram, from what all three of you have spoken of so far, I would now want to go back to where you started of addressing the gap of information and transformation. And is it a transformational journey that we're looking at, or is it just an informative download that we're looking at? I think that's what Brillian and Saumya were also kind of indicating at, that it has to form a part of a transformational journey. And if we're saying digitization is at the core of it, what role do you think? We'll stick to corporates for the time being, and then we'll probably move to societal impact. At the corporate level, how ready do you think we are as corporates to be able to adapt to and adopt the more simpler ways of learning, like gamification? Right now, when Brilliant was talking about whether we create a leaderboard or whether we create a competition or a gamification, we are on our mobile phones with various games at some point or the other. Everybody has their own fancy. The way they are able to engage us, and that's not just for the entertainment value, it is also for the engagement value that they have created with us, right? in that, keeping that ethos in mind, do you think the corporates are ready to engage their learners on a micro-learning philosophy or principle with digitization as a platform, making learning easy? Are we ready for it is the real question.
See, I don't think corporates have an issue with the model per se. Okay, I think the problem
Hmm.
is that we need to understand a few things in the evolving context of how the world is changing. The more
Sure.
we can make the environment that people are learning in close to the way we live today. Okay, so you live a certain way and you make, things adapt to the way we live, then you're ensuring a
Hmm.
much better, kind of learning output. What happens,
Mm-hmm.
or used to happen at least, was corporates were lagging behind because your Instagrams and
Hmm.
your Facebooks and things were far ahead in terms of how they were engaging with people compared to how,
Absolutely.
corporates were engaging. And that
Corporates
is
are
exactly
engaging.
the
Correct.
gap, because your
Hmm.
workforce is evolving. You have multi-generational
Hmm.
workforces, and you have a lot of new people
Yes.
coming in who have now grown up in this environment. So their attention
Hmm.
spans
Hmm.
are shorter. Now, it's not a question of complaining about it, but it's a question of how do I now take advantage of it?
How do I
Yeah.
address it? Correct.
And that's, I
Absolutely.
think, where we
Hmm.
are lagging behind, where we are saying, oh, we've done this
Hmm.
way forever, and let's try and push it till we think. But it will eventually collapse if we don't adapt. So I don't
Hmm.
see a
Hmm.
challenge in terms of corporates not wanting to adapt. It's just that there is a little bit of
Hmm.
legacy, there is a little bit of
Hmm.
lack of intent, because we have not yet realized the intensity of the need for change. Okay, you are still
Hmm.
thinking,
Hmm.
okay, maybe I can stretch my old stuff for a bit and all that. But I think it's coming.
Hmm.
Most corporates are interested in transformation, in skill development, because that's the purpose, because that purpose is important for them, because otherwise they lose out on
Hmm.
real benefits. So I don't think they are going to
Absolutely.
resist
Yes.
it per se, but it is about finding that new model that works, to get out of the
Hmm.
comfort
Hmm.
zone of how we used to kind of land in a place
Hmm.
where, okay, this will work. And I think that is the place
Hmm.
that we are in right now. I don't think there is a reluctance to adopt something new, but it's a conviction to do it quickly, because they've not yet found the kind of, yeah,
Found the right answer.
the exact formula in some ways. I think it's happening. Gamification, see, the only problem with gamification is sometimes it's very, everything can be gamified, but not all gamification works. So even for
Hmm.
gamification to work, it has to, go into a proper design where you've thought through it carefully, seen your audience, have more, real engagement with it, where there is, so you don't make it very hacky. If you make it, in a proper way, I think that will, kind of help people. And there are many good-
Yeah, there can't be a frivolous element
Correct.
to it for sure. It has to be more seriously designed and thought. But you still feel it's more of a transitionary phase, so we don't know what's that exact answer that we're looking for, but we're ready for the
See,
answer
and I
if
just
we
want to
have it.
add, see, already your micro entertainment has taken over the world. We know that, right?
Yes.
So now Facebook, in
Yes.
a
Yes.
way, is not really thing, because Instagram is far ahead. If you, we had a chat with the group
Correct.
and said how many of you are on Insta and how many of you are on Facebook. Everybody's on Insta. So we know
Hmm.
in real terms that your future is there. Okay, that is,
And spans are growing
hands are growing
shorter. Your
smarter.
attention
People
spans are
are,
actually
yeah.
growing
So if
shorter.
you don't use
Hmm.
that to your advantage, then you're going to lag behind. Really, it's about that. And
Absolutely.
I think, if we can leverage on that, we're probably likely to bridge that gap faster.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. So that's thought provoking. Saumya, I'll direct a quick question at you because you're again at the helm of things. So you being a decision maker, right, for your organization, what are those one, two, three things that would impress you when somebody comes up to you and says, you know what, this is how I would want to, do transformational learning via, let's say, a micro learning maybe at your organization? What are those one, two, three things which you would be looking at for yourself to be convinced that it's going to work?
First and foremost, do you need it? Okay. Are you doing it for the
Absolutely.
cosmetic reason? बाजू वाले ने किया इसलिए मुझे करना है. You know, that's the rat race that we are all, you know, involved in. किसी और ने किया है, okay ma'am, I saw someone who did an executive MBA. अरे but तुम किधर हो? You are into content writing. तुम executive MBA करके करोगे क्या? So one is, where is the need? Second is, the organization needs to know two things. What is the goal that they want to achieve? And very importantly, organizations also need to know their target audience. Today, you have people from, you know, as young as, because I am in the manufacturing, so our intake is like 18 years old. And the oldest employee who is working with us as a consultant is 72. So can you see the breadth? So how many of them, and all of them want to get into the learning mode? So the COVID time, when Zoom came in, we had to create a small, you know, clipping, a video that we shared with people that this is how you log in. Because हमारे यहाँ work from home का कुछ होता नहीं है. I can't give इतना सा diamond and इतना सा gold and tell them please make it and send it back to us. We can't do that. Right? So for us, these small things matter. So you need to know your goals. You need to know your audience. Then there has to be a time frame. Just because it is micro learning and just because you're allowed to do it at your pace doesn't mean that you have to give all the time in this world, you know, to the person, and you know, you do it at your pace. So time is very important. So like we always say, smart goal, you know, it has to be simple, measurable. We
all know. Dovetail into that for sure.
So you need to identify each of those, bring it back to the micro learning as well. But my one and only take is, it cannot be done only and only for the cosmetic reason. There has to be a well-defined and designed, you know, there is an effect and the cause and effect as well. The organization should be able to absorb. You have trained a person to a certain level. Now, are you ready to take that skills on, give a better or a higher responsibility, make that resource be more productive, or are you creating a more frustrated resource in your ecosystem? Because sometimes people learn, but they're not able to, or they don't get an opportunity. So that's where the ejection happens. You know? So you need to
very pertinent points, yes.
You know, and then execute a certain thing. So that would be my 2 cents on this.
Absolutely. I think that's very pertinent, that, you know, whether you actually have a need for it, whether your target audience is ready for it, and whether they're being able to apply it. I think that's very pertinent in this whole scheme of things. So Brilliant, that brings me to you, because you are in the heart of you know, what I would say, from an HR perspective in the education space. So that's like the perfect blend of what we are talking about today. So which are the areas, which are our low-hanging fruits here, you know, and which are the areas where we should be able to create a difference very quickly, and the impact would be far outreached if we are looking at micro-learning as a principle and as a platform. So which are those low-hanging fruits that we should be able to attack first?
That's a tricky question, because all trainers in the industry would be aiming a gun at me when I say this. But
I'll do some editing probably, but let's still come up with it.
But look at the way organizations have evolved, right? Induction, for that matter. It's cliche to say, but induction definitely needs to be in that. Your basic skills, behavioral skills, which is not at an advanced level, should be there. While it's a tricky place to be in, and Neelakshi, I'll speak from personal experience also. While we say that breaking down in complex things into smaller pieces and sharing can help, but it's like the good old joke of someone seeing two people. One is digging, the second person is putting mud back. Person is digging, putting mud back, and this happens for 2 or 3 days, and fourth day the curiosity kills him, and he just asks what's happening. He says, oh, we are planting a tree, but that's not happening. Then they look back and say, oh, the second person is missing, right? So if you miss out because of the fragmented learning, if you miss out on that key element. And that
Agree.
is where I think one of the areas where we will need to probably use what Sriram mentioned is direct them, guide them, not force them to say this is it, but this is how the ideal steps should be.
Mm-hmm.
While
Mm-hmm.
you have the flexibility, while you have the liberty to learn at will, it should be in a sequential manner. It cannot be chalo aaj mujhe man kiya to I'll just dig and tomorrow I'll just put mud over it. But the expectation itself gets lowered when you break it into micro learning, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
chalo
Sure.
de diya hai, when you do it. Can we link that to some sort of an
Mm-hmm.
assessment
Mm-hmm.
which can be assessed at work or maybe through the app itself? uh,
Mm-hmm.
while yes, I know there can be a debate about how we look at gamification, but I'm not talking about frivolous gamification. I'm
Sure.
talking about realistic, applicable gamification that can make a difference to the person saying, Brilliant, the industry stands at 80%. You seem to be somewhere in the 60-70 range. You
Mm-hmm.
need ABC to move up there. So
Hmm.
while I say that yes, we should look at adapting some of these technologies and adopt what is relevant, but once we have adapted
Mm-hmm.
and adopted, we need to become adept at that. It's not just saying you just use it, you forget it, fill it, shut it, forget it, said one ad, but it will not work for us. It is fill it, shut it, refill it,
And
check
don't
it,
forget it. Yes.
and don't forget it. It needs to be something which is continuous, because
Hmm.
the intent is always there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sriram, Saumya, Neelakshi, we all said about this. The intent is there, but how do we make that intent converted into action is what
Hmm.
will help organizations, even in the social sector. If we look at, that's what makes a big impact. So I think instead of focusing on larger goals, big hairy or
One
goals should
step
be
at a
there,
time.
but do small, which can make a big impact.
No, I think I see total merit in what all of you collectively are saying and what we are resonating with each other. That and what I hear you all say is, as a standalone concept, it's great, and it can be practicalized, it can be implemented, but it cannot be treated as a standalone by itself. There has to be a objective, there has to be a defined target audience, and there has to be a very tangible implementation plan. Only then does this fall into these pieces fall in places. Otherwise, it's just cosmetic, as Soumya was saying. That yeah, great, we have a micro learning platform and we have small nugget of knowledge modules. But then what? Then what is something which is blur and it's at the horizon, but we don't know. So I think that's come out very clearly out of this discussion. Uh, Parting thoughts, closing thoughts, I would invite from each of you in any order. Anybody can take it up.
Okay, let me go. All right.
Sure.
I think one is people need to embrace learning. There is too much emphasis on entertainment. Entertainment is the pursuit of pleasure. Pleasure, spikes and crashes. I think we need to move past it. Pleasure
Certainly.
is okay. Pursuit of pleasure, entertainment are fine, but as a proportion of your life, there is disproportionate pursuit of
Hmm.
pleasure today,
Hmm.
especially with the technology kind of enticing you to do it. At some point, I think we need to know those boundaries better.
Hmm.
And first is, and to really embrace learning, in a much more important way, and make it a part of our life, make it a habit. 20
Surely.
minutes a day, I think, is a must for every person, not only kind of kids, but even adults. That is the only thing that will kind of make sure that people are kind of in a way alive. Because
Hmm.
without learning, the news is not learning, entertainment not learning, learning is learning. The
Beautiful
difference.
thoughts.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you can work on what you like. We're not asking you
Hmm.
to learn something specific. You follow your passion, but learn, become a deeper kind of person, learn it in pieces as a thing. And I think, where if we can also become smarter in the way we are offering things, because there are things happening around us. We know, that there is a concept of open loop, which is used by your Netflix, right? Because they
Yes.
never end a serial, with a thing. They leave it with a bit of a suspense,
Yes.
and then it makes you, because then you're forced to watch the next
They'll
episode
never
because
let you go. They'll always
yeah,
have you
so
on the hook.
that's a very important psychological thing, because it's an open loop. The way our brain works is that it wants things to close. So as
Hmm.
long as it's kept open,
Correct.
there's a draw, right? And so if we can bring in those elements into our nudges and kind of things where we keep improvising, because sometimes it's very straightforward and kind of plain in the
That's
way
true.
that we want to convey stuff. So we
Mm,
need to
mm.
embrace some of these things which are being done, and a lot of research has gone into these techniques.
I'm sure.
Not,
I'm sure.
yeah, as
Mm.
right. I think if we can do these two things, encourage learning as a way of life, and keep improvising what we are offering, in a way that it can increase engagement, I think we're well on our way to, kind of making this more mainstream concept.
Fantastic. Enriching. Samya?
So I will just keep it very short, very crisp. One, that micro learning. We're seeing a lot of YouTubers. Let me just say that one Mr. G, a Videshi Admi, comes on the YouTube and says, "Why do we need universities?" And then there is a whole lot of debate going on that. So coming back to that debate, microlearning cannot be an institution, cannot be a substitute, cannot be a replacement to institutions, trainers, or to the learning. It can
Absolutely.
only be a complementary thing to people and an add-on. So
Mm.
for foundation, you do need universities, because during those time, whether you're in schools, colleges, universities, you're absolutely focused on one particular goal, which is enhancing your, knowledge. But micro learning can come and be just an add-on. So please do not think that I have done
As a
this
substitute.
short Coursera course and I
Absolutely.
am a PhD in something. No, that is not the case. All right. And secondly, yes, organizations need to understand that if you do not need a trainer to come in for, maybe a soft skill training, which is at a very base level, yes, microlearning can come and facilitate that. But you need to create measurables in the system that also,
Mhm.
measures the output, like my other panel members have.
Like
So
your any
just
others. Yes,
concluding that
absolutely.
it cannot be a replacement, but it can always be a complement.
Totally. I think that makes total sense. Brilliant. Would want to end with your comment on this
So
entire
I'm
episode.
sure Saumya would be scared of what WhatsApp University graduates would say
Oh,
about what
ask
you
me,
said right now.
ask me.
But
14th February suddenly became a Shahid Divas, and I was like, what?
It's the writing is on the wall. When she says it, the writing is on the wall as to what she's scared of.
so, while I do agree that it will never replace organizations, institutions, the teachers. With pride, I can say that they were the ones because of whom I am who I am today. There is Google for Education,
Most certainly.
right, which is available free.
Most
But
certainly.
again, when everything is free and there is no direction, that makes things different and difficult. So look at it from a overall experience perspective. When we got fed up of classroom learning, we decided to break the mold and said, let's go outbound. Let's give them an experience, and from the experience convert it into a learning. So I would say the 3 Ds that we should keep in mind is, the first D is design. Design to your needs, not because Sharma ji ka ladka has done it, you need to have it. You need to do it because there is a need that you have identified,
Totally.
maybe for yourself
Mm,
or for the organization. The
True.
second D
mm, mm,
is the data that you collect, you curate based on feedback, based on whatever you hear in the market on that particular micro learning element, and try to derive
mhm,
insights which can give you a direction in terms of decision making. And last and most important
mhm.
is the D for driving effective outcomes. Now,
Yes,
unless you
that's
are
very important.
driving effective outcomes, I don't think it's going to make any difference. And I would say, being a
Mm,
lover of crime series, I take what Sriram said. Kahani mein kahani is very important, because there is one story which is running, and in between there is one story which gets completed, but you are curious. What happened to Gibbs?
you're
Right?
curious.
Where is he?
Yes.
When will he come back? I'm still waiting for him to join NCIS. Right? And then there is so many things
Mm,
happening,
mm.
and suddenly you are wondering, oh, when will this end? Season 27, it still continues.
This analogy application would be very interesting in microlearning, I must tell you. So I think we are again on the same page in terms of microlearning definitely being one of the pursuits, but not the only one. And the way all of you articulated that the need is important, with which the design obviously has to kind of coincide with the need, and the application needs to be well measured and structured. And I think if that can be brought into pace, I think this entire transformational learning through microlearning is also a possibility, and it could take us to the goal that we're trying to reach at, that having the resources who will fill up the shoes of the various vacancies that we look at a more granular level, or rather at the various resource crunch that we look at a more larger level, whether it's in the corporates or whether it's as a society at large. So thank you so much. Was an enriching and very, very exciting discussion as always, and would look forward to much more of these. Thank you so much, guys.